Hey, what's up, podcast? We are here in Baser, Kansas at Oak Creek Nursery, where today we talk to the co-founder, Angie Hundley. She has a new book out called A Recipe for Bad Lemons. Super cool. Definitely should check it out. And go ahead and listen to our conversation now. Thanks. Angie Hundley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You know, this is perfect because our podcast is called Ingredients to Happiness, and then you literally have, with your book, A Recipe for Bad Lemons. Mm-hmm. Ingredients, you play off that as well. So yeah, do you want to just kind of start by telling us a little bit about yourself and basically why you wrote a book?
Grew up in Leavenworth. I went to college at Baker. Been around the area for a while. Live in Baser currently. And the book has been something I always kind of thought about doing. Never really given it too much thought. It was just one of those like, hey, I think it'd be really fun to write a book.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I thought about it over the years, and I went and interviewed a social worker in Olathe with KVC, which is foster homes. And I thought at the time I wanted to do some type of mentorship or something to give back since I was in the foster care system as a child. And so I met with a social worker. I brought my adoption book with me and sat there and had coffee with her. And she was flipping through my book and my adoption book. And she was like, wow, these are the same exact forms and pages now that we've had, 30 years ago. And it just floored me. And then we talked about the success rate of foster children. And she told me that it's 5% is generally the success rate. And I think if there was one thing that I took away from that meeting with her was that, like, I went home that night and honestly, I cried because I couldn't believe that. Like, I think for me, I just took it for granted. Like, you just get up and you do what you're supposed to do. Like, I'm just doing what everybody else is doing.
Sure.
And go to college, graduate, work, I've never took time to look back and use that as any reason to do something different.
Yeah. And so basically the way your book works is you describe maybe a bad lemon or something that has been challenging for you in life, and then you have an ingredient. And so like the first thing you start off with in your book is bad lemon, family.
Right.
So you want to give a little background on basically life in the foster care system?
Yeah, so the first chapter is essentially talking about how we ended up in foster care. And I say we because I have two sisters. And so I talk about, the day we went into the foster care system and, the whole bad lemon scenario of why we ended up there, which was that we were a prodigy of, sexual abuse and physical abuse. And so we were in and out of different homes for a course of 2 years. And I don't think my birth mom really knew what she wanted to do. I think she was very confused about the whole situation. And I think while she was trying to figure out if she wanted to be a mother or was ready to let go of us, we just kind of got tossed around. And we ended up getting adopted in separate homes, the three of us. And over the years, we stayed in contact with each other for the most part. And so living in the foster home system, it's tough because you have kids. Mm-hmm. You're living out of a box.
How many times did you move?
4 times.
4 times.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the average duration of stay?
Well, the longest one I was in before I got adopted was my longest one. I think I was with her, and believe it or not, she was single, had never been married, lived in a single wide trailer home. And I was with her for about 1.5 years before. So the first 3 was pretty, like, I'd say every 2-3 months or so. I mean, I know I went to different schools with every single one. And I was in Southeast Kansas, and I started off in Iola, Kansas. And then from there, I went, to the other side of Iola, east. And then from there, I went west and then ended up back in Iola.
Can you kind of describe the emotions that you felt as you were moving from place to place, or lack of emotions?
For me, I was the oldest. I had my 2 younger sisters, and my little sister, she was, I think, 2 at the time. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, I stepped into that motherly role for them. Mm-hmm. I was more concerned about their safety, their well-being, making sure they were okay. That I think I didn't have time to really focus on my feelings, even though I was hurting and I knew it. And the hardest part was when we got separated. When we all three went to that first foster home, we all slept in the same room together. I mean, if it was a different home, we're with complete strangers, but we were all still together. And even though we were in that foster home and we were all together, I still felt safer than I was at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But when we separated, when we left that home, and then Lori, my little sister, went on to her own family, and then my other sister and I went on, that was hard because I worried about her and where she was going, who was taking care of her. And that second foster home, I remember I was a mess. Like, that's probably when it really hit me that our family's changing. And I remember talking to our foster parent or foster mother, and I was generally worried about my sister. And I remember her calling the social worker and was like, "Hey, can you let Angie know what's going on with her little sister? Because she's worried." And I remember the social worker telling me that this nice family had her. They had 3 older boys, and they always wanted a little girl. And so then I felt better about it. But I mean, the move's tough. You're learning to adapt to a new family. You're with complete strangers, and it was easier having my sister there with me. But when we got separated, it was like you're just kind of fending for yourself.
So what was the lesson that you learned then, or the ingredient for this bad lemon or bad cards that maybe you were dealt?
For me, I think just getting through this situation and not looking at it for what it was, I made myself believe that even though I knew the situation we were in was terrible, in my mind, I made myself believe my mother gave us up because she wanted us to have a better life, even though I knew that wasn't the case. I knew that she didn't care. She didn't want us, But in my mind, I made myself believe that because who couldn't forgive a mother who wanted better for her children?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had another challenge in I believe you were a teenager, and you were after a certain car. You got your dream car, and then you ran into some issues on the road one night.
Mm-hmm. I was out with my boyfriend at the time, and he was, I think, 21, 22. I was 17, 18. I guess I liked older men. We were all out. We were hanging out at a bar. It was a karaoke bar. I rarely ever drink. I mean, we're young. We all drink, If I knew I was driving, I didn't. But that night, his friends wanted to go to a casino. I couldn't go. I wasn't 21. So it was decided I'd go back home. My boyfriend at the time was going to follow me. And we were on the highway. And it was funny because he had a sports car, and we were kind of pretending like we were racing each other. And we come up to the stoplight, and, I take off, and I end up in front of him. And then I kind of look back and kind of laugh, like, "Hi, I beat you." And then next thing I know, I see this car on the left-hand side of the road with flashing lights. And then I see this woman standing in the road, like with her hand up, telling me to stop. And I remember it was blonde hair and flesh, and I just saw legs. And I was like, "Oh my God, there's a person in the road." And I, slammed on my brakes. She comes inside the car, hits the passenger seat, goes back out on the front of the car and flies over, and it's just, it was, 12:30 in the morning. But it was one of those situations where it was like, what the heck just happened? Did this really just all happen? I remember the music was still blaring in the car, and for the longest time I would hear that song and I would just tense up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was pretty scary. I had a hard time driving a car after that, as you can imagine. The smell in my car was horrible. When the police had my car, it had sat out in the rain and it had gotten rained on, and there was this really weird, just moldy smell that I associated with that car wreck. And so getting back in that car and smelling that was just horrific for me. Seeing, broken glass coming out of the dash where, all the glass had been collected. There'd be little pieces of it. Sometimes I'd see on the floorboard, and it would freak me out. Like, I was just convinced that this dead woman was coming back to haunt me.
So your ingredient for getting over that was power of mind. So what were some of the techniques that you employed to work through that?
Well, sometimes I think we often we avoid things because it's easier than hitting it head on. And so obviously I would avoid driving. I would avoid getting in the car. But the reality of it is I can't have someone drive me around the rest of my life. And so I forced myself to get in the car, and I sat in the car, and that was my first step. Just getting in there, and I cried. And then I got out.
You didn't even drive the car.
I just sat in it because, I had to get past whatever that smell was that was making me mental. And then I told myself, I'm just going to drive around the block. And I drove around the block, come back, cry. And then drive, 2 blocks, and then 4 blocks. And you just keep going and going and going. And I finally got to the point where I was fine driving, but my hurdle was driving at night still. I remember a squirrel or something ran out on the road one time, and I just hit the brakes. And at that point I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. But again, can't have somebody drive me around the rest of my life. So I finally mastered driving at night. And then my final journey with that was driving past that location of the wreck, because that was tough. And it's a big, fairway where everybody travels to get places. And so I just had to do it. I just had to get myself in the mindset of driving through there. And I remember the therapist at the time telling me that, you just have to force yourself to get through there, because eventually you'll go through there and not even realize you're going through there. And as painful as it was, and the first time I drove by the scene of the wreck, no joke, the family was out there, I don't know, visiting the crosses or something. And it was just then I had another moment of, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But then, now I pass it all the time. I forget about it half the time when I drive by there. And I was by there this morning, didn't even think about it.
The next couple chapters, you start talking about your family, and you've got 4 kids, and they keep you real busy.
Yeah.
But maybe kind of elaborate on they all had kind of unique journeys into the world, and do you think that was by design of having 4 kids, and being a foster kid yourself, and just learning or wanting to have a large family, I guess?
I really don't know. I never really said. I think I always said I'd have 3 children, and I'm openly admit the last one was kind of an afterthought. But I always wanted to be a mother, but at the same time I was a little bit scared because I'd had all these bits and pieces of a mother in my life, but I didn't have a mother that fit me. So I think when I became a mother, for me it was all trial and error, trying to figure out what worked best. And as you know, each child is different. So there were some challenges for me, in terms of how to be a mother. But I think I just looked collectively at the motherly figures I had in my life and what I liked about each one, and kind of pulled those in. And everything really is trial and error as a parent. Some things work for the oldest one that don't work for the second one. And they're also different, in terms of their temperament, their mentalities, everything. And I'm still learning.
No, I mean, I've enjoyed the story about hey, you make your kids learn how to do laundry super young, they got to earn that allowance,
Yeah, I'm probably old school in that, and I don't think that they get it. None of my friends do chores, and I have some weird quirks, but it kind of works. We laugh about it now that they're older, Yeah. But yeah, but it's fun. I wouldn't change any of it. I'm proud of all of them, and we have a great relationship.
Yeah.
Individually, we all share common things together. So
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and I feel like they all represent me, obviously, in little pieces of me, and I see myself in them.
What do they think about your book?
They're really proud of me. I initially wrote this just for them. When I first sat down and decided I wanted to capture all these bad lemon scenarios, it was more because I wanted them to see that life brings you challenges. You're gonna run into things, and you're gonna think, my God, I can't do this. But you really can. It's just a matter of figuring out what the problem is and how to tackle it so that you can pick up, dust off, and move on. And my kids laugh that I'm not a coddling mother. I mean, I really am a coddling mother, but but they're really, I'm sympathetic. At the same time, I think that part of my background allows me the capability of looking at situations much differently.
So what's super interesting to me is like the business side of things. I think you have a really unique story as well in terms of getting into the nursery business. We're here at Oak Creek Nursery in Baser, Kansas. How on earth did you get involved in a nursery?
I have to be honest, I sometimes think about that and I laugh myself, because if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would co-own, a landscape lawn care retail nursery, I probably would have just laughed at you. But Kevin, my business partner, we had met each other at the gym, and we had talked a little bit about marketing, as we're doing squats or whatever it was. And so I'd kind of gotten to know him a little bit about his business because he had the lawn care side of stuff. And so we just kind of visited a little bit about that. Never really had any business, never talked about, joining forces by any means. But I was driving to work one day on the fort, and I was filling up with fuel, and he was there, and I was like, hey, how's the business going? And be just like me talking to you about donatology or something. And he was like, yeah, I'm so glad I ran into you. I am actually looking to market, to grow my business, and I'm thinking about buying a nursery. And I'm like, oh, that's great, And we talk a little bit about, what he's thinking in terms of his growth and purchasing the nursery. And that was about it, really. I think I gave my number, we exchanged whatever. And I don't think I heard from him for a little while. And then he called me and was like, hey, I really want to pull the trigger on this. And so I go and sit down with him and his office manager at the time. And I recognized very quickly, like, as I walked in the office, there was handwritten invoices everywhere, like stacks of them. Yeah. And it overwhelmed me.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I walked in and I was like, my God, there's probably 20 hours of handwriting in here, minimal. And I in my mind, I even knew the minute I walked in there, I'm like, this guy does not need marketing. He needs to get his stuff together. Like, he needs some efficiency. And my brain's more wired like that anyways when it comes to being efficient. And so after I met with this office manager, I was just very blunt with him, like, you need to figure out a way to not have stacks of handwritten stuff, because I don't even know how you could incorporate more handwriting into your, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I get
where do
it.
you add more handwriting or more stacks of invoices? So, yeah, we talked about that. And then, I met with the nursery owners at the time, and I didn't really see the processes going together. But again, I saw 2 dinosaur businesses, and it looked overwhelming.
Yeah.
I had no idea the financial state that either one of them were in. Never really discussed it.
Yeah, in your book, you talk about the checking account had $5,000 in it.
Yeah.
And he had way more bills than that.
Oh,
he had
yeah.
a 6-figure tax liability.
Oh, I didn't even know at that point. When I came across the $5,000 checking account, I didn't know anything about the prior taxes not being done. And so that was probably, even maybe a month into it. But I do remember that first day being in the office after I left, a fairly lucrative position, working for the government.
Yeah, what was going through your mind? Like, what am I doing?
And I'm 6 months pregnant. And
I was nice.
Yeah, with my little one. I think I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life. And I'm not normally a risk taker. And I don't know why I decided to take this risk with Kevin and help him with this. I think I saw the fruition. I saw the end state of where it could be. Had no idea what I was going to come. I didn't think about what was going to be in the middle of all of that. And so, yeah, when I opened up the checking account, and then I was opening up drawers full of mail that had just been the fake house. You just throw everything in the fake drawer before people show up.
Yeah.
And then you open up drawers, and it's like,
I've got several of those drawers at my house,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah. So I kept finding all of these stacks of mail and bills, and I was like, oh my God. And then the phones are ringing nonstop, and to this day I can still hear that stupid phone ringing. There's people that have that ringtone that I'm like,
Yep.
It was very overwhelming. I would be lying if I said I really thought about okay, I can just go back and pretend like I never even got involved in this.
Yeah, sure.
Which most people probably would have. I think.
So what made you stay and embrace the challenge?
I like challenges. I think it was a commitment for me. I made a commitment to Kevin to help him with the business, and it was a lot. It was it was so overwhelming and intense, the amount of mess that, that he had. But I think for me, like, I like challenges and I don't give up easy. And I think it was more about proving, okay, I can fix this. And we had so many challenges along the way that, like I said, the tax was one of them. Like,
and you moved locations.
Right. And there's been several times where I've wondered, why on earth, like, God, why did you put me at that gas station? Like, what did I do to deserve this? But then I look at it now and where it's at, and it's definitely been worth it. We moved the business to Baser, and of course that's a big change too, because we also launched Oak Creek. We had the nursery that was already established, and you never know how that's going to turn out. But the city was very welcoming to us when we moved here, and everything just kind of came together. We were trying to keep the costs down as much as possible.
And the story behind the name Oak Creek?
Kevin, my business partner, is from Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And when we first drove into this lot, an older lady lived here, and it was just nothing but just grass. And I couldn't see the vision at first. And so we actually came here the first time and drove right back on out. And I was like, why did you take me to this place? What a waste of time,
Yeah.
And we looked at another place, almost purchased it, and then that fell through. And then we came back here, and really what did it for me is we drove past the grass, which is nowhere near this now, and there was a creek back there. And we had already designed the name Oak Creek Nursery. And I think for me, it was like, okay, that's our sign. There's a creek that runs back there. We want to name it Oak Creek. So there's something about this place. And I think from there, I never even thought about the fact that it was a house, that a 90-year-old woman lived here. It was a garage. I think at that point it became, okay, how are we going to make this Oak Creek Nursery?
Yeah.
And that's really what happened.
I loved Kevin's story about designing the logo on a napkin.
I actually have a picture of it I'll have to share with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We, on Wednesdays, we would try to designate one day a week where we would regroup, because he was always out in the field. I was always inside the nursery, doing all the operational stuff and payroll and all the financials and just kind of making sure everything ran. And so we would meet on Wednesdays to kind of go through, like, okay, here's where the accounts are. Here's where this is. Here's what I'm working on. What do you have going on the field? And so we were sitting at lunch, and then we were like, okay, we're moving the business. We've got to come up with a new name. So what are we going to name it? And we were running through all these lists of ideas, and finally, like, Oak Creek just hit. And then once we got the name, then we're like, okay, how are we going to design this logo? And we drew it up on a napkin. And I think I scanned it in that day and sent it over to our graphic designer. And him and I went back and forth a few tries, and then it became Oak Creek, our logo.
So how would you define success? I mean, obviously, you've got 4 amazing kids, a multi-million-dollar business. I mean, what does it ultimately boil down to for you?
I just had this conversation with my daughter the other day, but I think when you can wake up every day and you can look at what is all around you, look at all of the grateful situations that have been given to you, instead of looking at what's not being given to you, or what you're missing out on, or what somebody else has. I think that's when you can say that you have success. When I can wake up every day knowing I'm happy and content and grateful for what I have and how I've gotten it, and not be so concerned with what my neighbor across the street has, or why my best friend did this, or I cannot believe I didn't get that cup of coffee from somebody, where I think someone's always wronged me. I think that's when you can say that you have a successful life, that you can wake up and see the fruition of it and be grateful for what you have, not look at what you don't have.
It's so true. So what's next for you?
I think I'm going to write another book.
You're going to write another book? About what?
I don't know. I have ideas.
And we haven't even published this one yet.
I know.
I say we, because I feel I'm on Team Angie.
You are. You've read it, so that's why.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I don't know. I'm starting to angle more into volunteer work and, giving back. And I see so many different opportunities of things to capture. And so I don't know. I think it's been a process by, writing a book, of course, and having it published. But I don't know. It's kind of fun. I got the foundation already built. for
Absolutely.
this. So now it's just incorporating more. But, you know, I have mild winters. It's pretty quiet. And so it's kind of fun to just plug into computer and just let it all out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find your book if they want to read it?
On Amazon, it'll be out on the 21st of October. And I think you just type it in, and I'll eventually have it on my website and my Facebook page. And so there'll just be a direct link to go and purchase it.
So you can search Angie Hundley, author. The book is called A Recipe for Bad Lemons. Thank you so much for hosting
Thanks,
us
Andrew. I
here.
appreciate you having me on here.
All
It's
right,
great.
best of luck.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, if you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. Also, you can find us on social media in the links below. Thank you.